A 1904 wedding portrait resurfaced, and historians grew uneasy as they enlarged the image of the bride. The photograph arrived at the New Orleans Historical Collection inside a water-stained cardboard box, part of an estate donation from a Garden District mansion that was being cleared after its elderly owner passed away. Archivist Claire Duchamp had handled hundreds of similar donations. Attics and basements often offered forgotten treasures mixed with ordinary clutter. Most items required careful cataloging but revealed little real historical value. This particular box held familiar pieces of a wealthy family's past: silk gloves, yellowed letters tied with ribbon, a tarnished silver compact, and at the bottom, wrapped in fragile tissue paper that fell apart at her touch, a single large photograph in an ornate brass frame. Claire gently removed the frame and studied the image. It was a formal wedding portrait, the kind of detailed studio photograph common among New Orleans society families at the start of the century. The photographer's embossed mark in the corner read, "Lavo and Son Portrait Studio, Royal Street, 1904. The image showed a bride and groom posed in the traditional style of the era. The groom stood tall and stiff in a dark, formal suit, his expression serious, one hand resting on a decorative chair. Beside him sat the bride, her white gown a masterpiece of Edwardian fashion, layers of silk, detailed lacework, and a high collar decorated with pearls. But what caught Claire's attention immediately was the bride's veil. It was unusually thick, made of heavy lace that cast deep shadows across her face. Most bridal portraits from that time showed veils pulled back, so the bride's features were clearly visible. These photographs were meant to display beauty and social standing, but this veil hung forward, hiding much of the woman's face and giving the image a strange, ghost-like feeling. Claire carried the photograph to her desk and placed it under her magnifying lamp. The image quality was impressive for its age. The Lavo studio was known for technical skill. She could see each pearl on the bride's dress, the texture of the groom's mustache, the grain in the wooden chair. Yet the bride's face stayed hidden, unclear. Claire could see the shape of her features, the line of her jaw, but her expression could not be read through the heavy veil. Something about the pose felt wrong. The bride's posture seemed too stiff, her hands tightly clasped in her lap with a tension that suggested fear, not happiness. Claire made a note to have the photograph digitally scanned and enhanced. Modern imaging technology often revealed details invisible to the naked eye, even in photographs more than a century old. She sensed this image needed closer study. As she placed the portrait into an acid-free protective sleeve, Claire felt a growing sense of unease. Every wedding photograph she had ever catalogued carried at least some hint of celebration, even those from arranged marriages in strict times. This one carried something else. It carried fear. 2 days later, Claire sat beside Marcus Reed in the collection's digital imaging lab. Marcus had worked with historical photographs for 12 years and specialized in restoration and enhancement. He treated each image like a puzzle, uncovering details hidden by time, damage, or poor exposure. "This one's in excellent structural condition," Marcus said as the high-resolution scan appeared on his monitor. "The Lavo studio used high-quality materials. The albumin print has survived very well, but that veil will be difficult. It creates heavy shadow over the face." Claire leaned closer. "Can you work through it? I want to see her expression, her eyes. Something about this portrait feels wrong." Marcus adjusted settings on his keyboard. The image sharpened, contrast increased slightly. He zoomed in on the bride's face until the veiled features filled the screen. The lace created a complex pattern of light and shadow, but modern software could analyze and reduce those effects. "I'll try increasing shadow detail without blowing out the highlights," Marcus said. "This will take a few minutes." The software processed the image, and slowly the bride's face became clearer. The outline of her nose appeared, then her lips, the shape of her cheeks beneath the veil. Marcus continued refining the image, lifting midtones and sharpening details. Then Claire saw it. "Marcus, stop." On the screen, now clearly visible, were streaks running down the bride's cheeks. They were not shadows from the veil. They were tears caught at the moment the photograph was taken. The bride had been crying during her wedding portrait. "That's unusual," Marcus said quietly. Emotional brides weren't rare, but photographers usually waited until they regained composure. These studios charged high fees. Clients expected flawless images. "Can you enhance it more?" Claire asked, her voice tight. "I want to see everything." Marcus applied additional filters and sharpened the focus further. He adjusted the tonal curve, pulling every possible detail from the dark areas beneath the veil. The bride's face filled the screen. Now they could see more than tears. Her eyes were wide, her jaw clenched, every muscle showing distress. Then Marcus noticed something else. He zoomed further, focusing near the bride's left eye, where the veil's shadow was deepest. He increased exposure carefully. The discoloration appeared slowly, but once visible, it was unmistakable. A bruise, dark and severe, spreading from her eye socket toward her temple. The heavy veil was not a fashion choice. It was meant to hide violence. Claire and Marcus sat in silence, staring at the screen. The crying bride, the hiding veil, the hidden bruise. This was not a wedding portrait. It was evidence of something much darker. "We need to identify them," Claire said finally. "I need to know who she was and what happened to her." The Lavo & Son Portrait Studio had been one of New Orleans' most respected photography businesses in the early 1900s, serving wealthy Creole and American families in the French Quarter and Garden District. The studio closed in 1932, but its records were preserved by the Louisiana Photography Archive, kept in a climate-controlled facility near Tulane University. Claire contacted the archive's director, Dr. Simone Bertrand, and explained what she had found. Simone, who had devoted her career to preserving New Orleans' photographic history, immediately understood the importance. "The Lavo sitting books are very complete for that period," Simone said. When Claire arrived the next afternoon, they recorded every client, every session, payments, and even notes about problems or special requests. They found the ledger for 1904 and searched entries from spring and summer. Wedding portraits were marked with a small decorative symbol in the margin. On June 18, 1904, they found it, "Wedding Portrait, Miss Emily DeVoe and Mr. Robert Thornton. 4 plates exposed, special sitting arrangement, $1,500 paid in advance by the DeVoe family." The price was unusually high, more than double the normal rate. The note special sitting arrangement was rare. "Emily DeVoe," Claire repeated. "The DeVoe family was prominent. I've seen the name before. Sugar plantations upriver, major city properties." Simone was already gathering more records. The Lavo studio also kept a private journal. Its owner, John Baptist Lavo, recorded thoughts about difficult or memorable sessions. Simone opened the leather-bound journal and turned to June 1904. On June 19th, the day after the sitting, Lavo had written at length, "Yesterday's wedding portrait troubles my conscience still." The DeVoe family arrived with the bride exactly at 10. Miss Emily was accompanied by her mother, Madame Celeste DeVoe, and the groom, Mr. Robert Thornton. Also present was Mr. Henri DeVoe, the bride's father, and Mr. Thornton's associate, whose name I did not catch, though his presence made everyone uneasy. The bride appeared unwell, pale, with reddened eyes from recent tears. When I suggested postponing the sitting, Madame DeVoe sharply insisted we proceed. The bride said nothing and stared at the floor. Most disturbing was the veil. Madame DeVoe brought it herself, unusually heavy and far denser than normal. She demanded it be placed forward to cover much of her daughter's face. When I objected, she became agitated and insisted it remain. I posed the couple as instructed. Mr. Thornton stood while the bride sat. The veil was arranged to cast deep shadow. Through my lens, I saw the bride trembling not from joy but fear. Mr. Thornton kept his hand on her shoulder firmly. When I asked her to turn slightly, his grip tightened and she flinched. He smiled coldly and claimed she was simply overwhelmed. I exposed 4 plates, though one would have been enough. I wanted them gone. The air felt poisonous. As they left, the bride looked at me for the first time. Even through the veil, her eyes pleaded for help. But the marriage was legal. The family agreed. A photographer does not interfere. When Madame DeVoe returned 3 days later, she approved the images and paid the balance. She said the couple had already departed for an extended honeymoon abroad. She did not say where. I pray I am wrong, but I fear for that young woman. Claire and Simone sat quietly after reading. Lavo had seen the truth and been powerless to stop it. We need to know what happened to Emily DeVoe, Claire said. Marriage records, newspapers, anything. Simone nodded. The DeVoe family would have been everywhere in society pages. The Times-Picayune and Daily States covered them closely. But Claire remembered one line. The couple had left the country, destination unknown. In 1904, that could mean anywhere, unless something pulled them back into records, death, scandal, or court action. She might vanish completely. I'll start with newspapers, Claire said. Maria. GE announcements first, then anything after. People this wealthy don't disappear, yet she felt a chill. In 1904, a married woman legally belonged to her husband. If Robert Thornton wanted her hidden, the law allowed it, and that veil hiding tears and bruises suggested that was exactly his plan. The Times-Picayune archives were digitized. Claire searched June 1904 and found the announcement dated June 12, Marriage of Interest to Society, Miss Emily Celeste DeVoe, daughter of Mr. Henri and Madame Celeste DeVoe of Audubon Place, to Mr. Robert Harrison Thornton of Boston, Massachusetts. The ceremony will be held at the family residence June 17th, followed by a private reception. Mr. Thornton is associated with maritime shipping interests and has recently established business connections in New Orleans. The couple will reside abroad following the wedding. The notice was brief, almost cold. No description of the gown, no guest list. Claire noted the details. Thornton was from Boston, new to the city, and the wedding was held at home, not at church. And again, no destination abroad. She searched for follow-up coverage, accounts of the wedding itself, and found nothing. There were no descriptions of the ceremony, no photographs of the bride in her gown. There was nothing at all. For a family with the DeVoe family's social status, this silence was remarkable. Claire then searched for Robert Thornton, widening her research to include Boston newspapers. She found several references. Thornton had been involved in shipping businesses and had once been investigated for questionable dealings related to cargo insurance fraud, though the charges were dropped due to insufficient evidence. There were also short mentions in Boston Society columns, usually noting his attendance at events where wealthy widows or unmarried heiresses were present. A clear pattern appeared. Robert Thornton was a fortune seeker, a man who targeted wealthy families, especially those with daughters ready for marriage. He had been engaged once before to a young woman in Philadelphia, but that engagement had ended suddenly, under circumstances the newspapers carefully avoided explaining. Claire felt her stomach tighten. The DeVoe family had married their daughter to a man with a suspicious history, a man linked to fraud and a broken engagement that ended without explanation. Why would a respectable family allow this? Claire searched for information about the DeVoe family's finances in 1903 and 1904. After hours spent reviewing business documents, loan records, and property filings, she found the truth. The DeVoe sugar plantations had been losing money for years. Poor harvests and growing competition from Caribbean sugar had badly weakened the family's finances. In March 1904, Henri DeVoe had taken out a large loan to cover debts and preserve their social standing. The loan came from a Boston financial firm where Robert Thornton was listed as a partner. The situation became clear. Thornton had effectively bought Emily DeVoe. He had given her father money the family desperately needed, and in return he received a young bride from a respected New Orleans family. Emily, bound by duty and social pressure, had no real choice. Claire expanded her research beyond New Orleans, searching for any record of Robert and Emily Thornton after their wedding. They were said to have gone abroad, but here, and did they ever return? She found the first clue in an unexpected place. A ship's passenger list from July 1904 showed the SS Britannic sailing from New York to Liverpool. Listed among the first-class passengers were Mr. and Mrs. R. H. Thornton, traveling on an extended continental tour, so they had gone to Europe. Claire searched British and French newspapers, a slow process because records were incomplete and often required translation. 3 months later, she found a brief mention in a Paris Society column from October 1904, noting the presence of the American couple Thornton at a reception hosted by a French banking family. After that, there was nothing. No further mentions in European newspapers, no record of their return to the United States, no travel documents showing movement between countries. It was as if they had disappeared somewhere in Europe. Claire turned her attention back to the DeVoe family. If Emily had written to her parents, if there had been any news at all, something should exist. What she discovered was more disturbing than silence. In February 1905, 8 months after the wedding, Madame Celeste DeVoe was admitted to a private sanatorium outside New Orleans for treatment of severe nervous illness. Records from the Louisiana Medical Archives noted that Madame DeVoe was deeply distressed about her daughter's fate and showed signs of overwhelming guilt and anxiety. The doctor's notes recorded her words. "She begged me not to make her marry him. She said he frightened her, that there was cruelty in his eyes. But we needed the money. Henri said we had no choice. Now she is gone, and I do not know if she is alive or dead. No letters come. He will not let her write. I know he will not. What have we done to our child?" Henri DeVoe visited his wife once in March 1905. The doctor noted that the husband appeared defensive and insisted their daughter was well and happy abroad. He claimed letters had been sent, but were likely lost. When Madame DeVoe became agitated and demanded proof, her husband left suddenly. He did not return. Madame DeVoe remained in the sanatorium for 2 years. She was released in 1907, but her health never fully recovered. Claire found her death certificate dated November 1908. The cause of death was listed as heart failure, but the physician added a note stating the patient had suffered prolonged melancholy related to an unresolved family tragedy. Claire felt a deep sadness reading this. The DeVoe family had made a terrible decision, and Madame DeVoe had understood it too late. But what had happened to Emily? Was she alive somewhere in Europe, trapped with a cruel husband? Had she tried to escape, or had something worse happened? Claire needed to follow Robert Thornton's trail. If Emily was to be found, he was the key. The breakthrough came from a genealogy researcher in London who specialized in American expatriates in Edwardian Europe. Claire had posted questions on historical research forums, and the researcher, Elizabeth Parker, responded with disturbing information. "I found the name Thornton while researching American deaths registered in France between 1904 and 1910, Elizabeth wrote. "There is a death certificate from Nice dated January 1906 for Emily Thornton, age 22. Nationality listed as American. Cause of death recorded as accidental fall from a villa balcony. The certificate was filed by her husband Robert Harrison Thornton." Claire's hands trembled as she read the message. Emily had died just 18 months after her wedding. An accidental fall. Elizabeth included scanned copies of the French death certificate and burial record. The documents were official and properly signed. Emily had been buried in the Protestant section of the Caucade Cemetery, in a plot purchased by her husband, but Elizabeth had more information. Robert Thornton remained in France for another year before returning to Boston in 1907. He remarried in 1909 to another young woman from a wealthy New York family. That wife died in 1911, also from an accidental fall, this time from a staircase in their Manhattan home. 2 wives, 2 falls. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Robert Thornton was not only a fortune hunter, he was a killer. Claire contacted the New Orleans Police Department's Historical Crimes Unit. Though the cases were too old for prosecution, documenting the truth still mattered. There could be other victims whose families never knew what happened. Detective James Russo, who specialized in cold cases, was immediately interested. "We've seen patterns like this before," he said. "Men who preyed on women at a time when wives had few legal protections. Give me everything." Claire sent him all her research: the portrait, Laveau's journal, family records, death certificates. Then she continued researching Emily herself. Who had she been before Thornton? What dreams had been taken from her? Newspaper archives revealed fragments. Emily had been described as skilled at piano and fluent in French. A 1902 article mentioned her charity work for a children's hospital, praising her kindness. A young woman with talent and compassion, sold by desperate parents and dead before her 23rd birthday. Detective Russo uncovered more. Thornton had married 4 times between 1904 and 1916. All 4 wives died under suspicious circumstances. Falls, drownings, accidents that seemed believable alone but horrifying together. His method was consistent. He targeted wealthy families in trouble, offered financial help, married the daughter quickly, removed her from her support system, and within 2 years she would die. Thornton inherited money or property each time. Between marriages, he vanished abroad, then returned to repeat the cycle. He targeted different cities and never stayed long. He was essentially a serial killer, Russo explained. But because the victims were his wives and deaths appeared accidental, he was never seriously questioned. Thornton's 4th wife, Helen Bradford of Baltimore, had raised suspicion. Her father demanded an investigation after her death in 1916, but it was ruled accidental. "What happened to Thornton?" Claire asked. Russo showed her a death certificate from November 1918. Thornton died during the influenza pandemic. He was 52, buried in an unmarked grave with no mourners. Claire felt relief, anger, and sorrow. Emily DeVoe had been his first victim. "I want to do something for them," Claire said. "They deserve to be remembered." She dedicated months to researching the victims' lives. She contacted descendants, collected letters, photographs, and memories. Emily emerged as a gifted pianist who dreamed of studying music in Paris. Grace Worthington had been a painter, Catherine Price a writer, Helen Bradford a teacher. Claire worked with the New Orleans Historical Collection to create an exhibition. Emily's wedding portrait was displayed alongside Lavo's journal and the enhanced images revealing tears and bruises. The exhibition told the full story of all 4 women and the system that failed them. It opened in October 2024. Descendants attended, some learning the truth for the first time. The bruise beneath Emily's veil became proof, not only of one man's cruelty, but of a society that allowed it. An elderly woman stood before Emily's portrait. "Emily was my great-great-aunt," she said. "We were never told the truth." She shared a photograph of Emily as a smiling teenager. Claire placed it beside the wedding portrait, hope beside fear. Emily and the others were finally seen. The wedding portrait remains on permanent display. Emily's tears and bruises are no longer hidden. Visitors stand in silence, understanding what the image truly represents. A moment of terror preserved, transformed into truth, memory, and warning.